Hi, friends. Amber from Goodell Gardens here. If you aren't aware, my name's Amber Wellington. I'm the executive director at Goodell Gardens in Homestead. We are a public garden and arboretum located in beautiful Edinburgh, Pennsylvania. That's in Erie County, the northwestern corner. And so um, we offer a variety of cultural and educational programming, particularly about gardening, the environment, and agriculture. But in this strange new world, we can't gather at Goodell Gardens, which is something we're used to doing for our learning opportunities. So what we've done instead is we have decided to offer some online virtual content, and the biggest thing that we think we can help with that people have been asking for is a guide to growing their own food. So today we're going to start um, by by the beginning this first episode of planting for the future, and we're calling this planting for the future because the Goodell sisters, Carrie and Margaret, who left us their property, they did plant for the future, and we're taking some inspiration from them, and just a little bit of background on sort of how this came about. We've had a lot of folks come to our Facebook page and ask how to grow their gardens. It's a scary time right now. Not everybody's food is secure, and we saw a few weeks ago going to the grocery stores in our town and not being able to find produce or milk or meat or bread. And so while we do hope that those traditional, I guess we'll say conventional, not traditional methods of gaining food and those systems come back and continue to support us the way we've been expecting. A lot of folks want to learn to grow their own food, and we fully support that. So what I have done is I have interviewed some members of our staff, and I'll continue to do that. And we have relied on the knowledge of some of the experts on our board of directors, in our group of contacts, and also on our new Facebook page, Goodell Gardeners. So we have this group as part of our Goodell Gardens Facebook page. You can see the link right online, and I'll be sure to post it underneath the video so that you can see that as well. But folks are sharing tips and tricks. Right now, we're talking about where you can buy seeds and plant starts because that's becoming a concern. And so I would really encourage you to visit this group. If you search Goodell Gardeners in your Facebook search bar, it'll come up. But there's the link right there too. And share your knowledge, and maybe you'll get featured here in planting for the future. So let's kind of get started. And so the first thing, and a lot of people will tell you this, but I'm going to tell you this too. The first thing you need to do is figure out where you're going to have your garden. Site selection is so important because it's impacted by so many different factors that are key to growing plants and food, and really that's the key to success, right? I would say, and my dad would tell you this, the location of where you're going to grow your garden, combined with how often you take care of it, is probably more important than whether or not you've ever done it before. So you got to select a great site for your garden. And so this image here is from Brooke Harrison. He's our gardens and grounds manager at Goodell Gardens, but this is actually a picture of his backyard, and I'm really excited that our staff is willing to sort of invite you guys into their lives a little bit so that you can see how they grow their own food. So when you're thinking about site selection, where will your garden grow, right? There are some considerations, and these are kind of the main ones, and I'm sure there are others, but this is what we've got for you. So first is, how much space do you have and how many people are you going to feed? So obviously, if you've got a little tiny yard, you can't really put in a big giant garden unless You're going to use all your landscape space and yard space for growing food. And if that's what you want to do, we would encourage that. Edible landscaping is beautiful and is very popular, and is probably the most environmental friendly thing you can do, along with permaculture. But there are other options, raised beds. And with that, we're talking about like the square foot garden method, where you put raised beds, but right on the ground, or actually beds that are raised up off of the ground as well. Container gardening, and growing food in hanging baskets. There's no reason why you can't plant your beautiful tomato that you want right next to your flowers in your front garden beds, if that's what you want to do. But there are other options as well. Think about sunlight. So most food plants, not all, but most food plants need 6 hours of direct sunlight per day. So there may only be a small portion of your yard that you can do this in. So keep that in mind, and really just watch where the sun is hitting your yard. Critters and fencing, boy, oh boy, you've got to protect that food. If there's one thing I have learned during my tenure at Goodell Gardens and Homestead, it is that deer are voracious, and so are woodchucks, right? So you're going to have to figure out how you're going to protect your food, particularly if you live in Edinburgh, anywhere near Goodell Gardens. So, we've had, for several years, we had square foot gardens, and edible demonstration gardens at Goodell. And we always battled groundhogs and woodchucks. It's the same thing. But those critters, they're smart. And it makes you crazy. I stood in the employee door on getting ready to leave one day and watched a woodchuck run as fast as he could at the middle of our fence. And it popped up and he ran right under it. He went in and ate all of our cabbage and broccoli and then left. I also, later on, after we fixed the weak spot in our fence, I watched him climb the fence to get into the garden to eat all of our vegetables. We've had them climb up sunflowers that were outside of the fence line to be able to get to the food. Deer are going to go anywhere they can find food. And, we get them even up on the side porch at Goodell Gardens when they think everybody's gone for the day. And, it's just a salad bar for them. So, you're going to need a fence. And there are different methods, and we'll have a special section just about fencing later on. But just think about, where can you put your food where the critters are least likely to bother them, where you still have sunlight and all of these other things. Watering your plants, right? So for germination, you need good soil, you need seed, you need water, and you need sunlight, right? Like those are the things we teach the kids during the field trip when we play our germination game. So water is extremely important. And what if you have a dry summer? What if you plant your gardens and then it doesn't rain for a while? Who knows, right? The weather's been crazy. So you've got to put your garden where you have access to water. And you don't want to have to carry water very far because it's heavy. And then access. Is it close enough to your home and kitchen? Are you and other people in your family able to get access to the food that you need and to care for your garden? Is somebody who you don't want to have access able to access your garden? These are all things to think about. And then I guess another consideration that's not on here is, zoning and homeowners associations. But hopefully folks will understand that right now people just need to eat. So with space, how many people are you going to feed, right? So if you've got more than, a couple people, you're going to need a couple more plants. And I found this guide at gardenbetty.com, which is a really great resource, and I'd recommend you take a look at her website. But it kind of just talks about different types of food and how many you would need based on fresh eating, and for each person. And I want to clarify this a little bit. When you're planting, keep in mind, like, don't grow things just because it's easy to grow. Grow things that you're going to eat. We don't need food waste on top of all the other issues we have. But if you do have extra and you need a place to donate it, your food pantry will take it, I promise you. Don't just grow a bunch of turnips because they're easy. When I was a kid, there was a book I read about, it was in the American Girls series, and because Molly, she grew up in World War II, and the only thing they had to eat was turnips, and she hated turnips. Like, don't just grow turnips because they're easy. Check with the people in your family, or the people that you're planning to feed, and grow what they like. And maybe don't just plant a whole bunch of zucchini because then that's all we ever have. Well, this year maybe I would welcome my porch or my car to be filled with zucchini. Just think about that. Maybe go fewer on your zucchini plants and not so crazy with that. But also think about how much your family eats. What other foods are included in your diet? So maybe you're on, the keto diet or the paleo diet, or you're a vegetarian, right? So like all of those specialized diets have different needs. And so you might not necessarily need as much, or you may need more than what Garden Betty is suggesting here. And then what can you grow in your climate, right? Like we live in the snow belt of northwestern Pennsylvania. We are technically zone B, according to the USDA zone map, but I would argue that depending on what part of Edinburgh you're in, think about your microclimate. Don't try and grow, bananas or or a lemon tree, or oranges or something like that, unless you have a greenhouse or the ability to do that indoors. Think about our frost system. Be prepared to run out and cover all your plants if we have a late frost, which we probably will. And then the last thing to think about here is, are you just eating, or are you planning on preserving this food as well? So if you're thinking, well, if I grow a bunch of beets and then I can can them, or I can make tomato sauce and have tomato sauce to eat all year, I won't have to buy that, and I eat a lot of pasta, something like that, you're going to need to grow additional items, additional plants of those types. But then you're also going to have to be ready to do that preserving when your plants are ready. So remember that too. And then, just a little bit of special advice from our staff. If you've never done this before, start small. The last thing we want is for you to spend a bunch of money on seeds and plants and growing materials and plant it all up and then not be successful and get discouraged. So start small. It's a lot easier to take care of a small garden than a big one. So this is the USDA plant hardiness zone map that I just talked about. And you'll notice that they've got our little corner of Pennsylvania in zone 5B. I just want disclaimer here to say, think about how your actual yard, what the weather at your house is like, right? So, you might be a 5A or a 4B, depending on how cold it gets where you're at. I guarantee you that you're not going to be a zone 6. But just think about that. And I'm not saying that you can't grow 5B plants. I'm just saying to keep that in mind, because depending on the weather, you may need to keep your plants, your seed starts or your plant starts indoors, particularly overnight, for a longer amount of time than you think. So just be prepared for that. We've got wacky weather here in Pennsylvania, especially in northwestern Pennsylvania. So there are different types of gardening that you can do, and a lot of folks, when they see vegetable gardening, the image in their mind is like a little tiny mini farm, right, with big giant plot of land that's tilled up, and rows upon rows upon rows of food. But there are other ways of doing it. And so this is our gardens and grounds manager, Brooke Harrison's backyard. And Brooke was kind enough, and I'm so excited that we're able to share this with you. He was kind enough to take some pictures. And this first one, I think he just recently took, but then the other ones that you'll see are from last summer. But Brooke, even though he's cared for plants his entire life, he never really got into vegetable gardening until recently. And he knew that he needed to start small. So he actually built these raised beds, and I want to talk about the construction of them a little bit. And I'm guessing here, but I'm pretty sure, knowing Brooke, that this was his thought process behind it. So if you see the uprights of these garden beds look like they're treated lumber to me. They're newer looking lumber. And so you need to remember, when you're building a garden bed, if you're going to build it out of wood, that you do not want treated lumber holding the soil that you're growing your food in, because of the way that they treat the lumber to keep it from rotting. But if you're going to put anything touching the ground that's wood, you want to build that out of treated lumber, or it'll rot quickly, and then you'll just be replacing it in 3 years. So this is my guess. My guess is that Brooke either used treated lumber or he used regular lumber and stained the uprights and like the frames of these raised beds. But then you can tell that the wood that was used to actually hold the soil and the food is untreated lumber and it's not been stained. You can tell because it's weathered differently. And so that's really important. You also notice that he has a landscape fabric lining his garden beds. Now that's not 100% necessary. If you don't have that, that's okay. But that helps keep your soil from falling out through the cracks. But it still allows your soil to drain. And I imagine it probably helps with moisture retention as well. And so, you know, these are great beds. I can't really tell you exactly how big they are, but Brooke told me that these were big enough for him to grow the veggies that his family wanted to have fresh. He has 3 kids and a wife at home, so this was big enough for a family of 5. And you know, you see those green containers. I'm sure that those are full of compost. You know, to be able to add to his soil when he gets ready to plant this spring. And then you'll notice just barely, you can see it, but if you look at those arborvitae, you can see he's got a chicken wire fence around his garden. And that's super important because it keeps the critters out. Now, here's 2 more photos of Brooks beds, and I am assuming these are from last summer, since you can see that there are plants in his garden beds. And oh, look, in that one with the gate, you can see that the wood that he planted his gardens in was shiny and new looking last summer. So definitely, that is untreated lumber that's just aged. So Brooke used a combination of fencing and plantings to keep critters from invading his garden. If you look at the big photo from a distance, you can see he's got these upright posts and Christmas lights. And I know that it's beautiful because everything Brooke builds is beautiful, but I guarantee you that those Christmas lights are also there to keep deer from jumping the fence. If you have something like that, it's going to keep the deer from thinking that they can jump it because they see that line and they can't really tell if that's a wall or not. So it keeps them, they're worried they're going to get tangled into it. If you want to be like Brooke, put beautiful plants, you know, landscaping around the outside of your garden. That certainly will help too. And make sure you've got a gate. Another thing that I want to say about Brooke's garden is you'll notice that it's right off the back side of his house. So I guarantee you he has access to water to be able to water his plants. And if he or his wife or his kids are cooking, they want to run out and grab something from the garden, they can go out that back door of their house right through the gate and be right there in a jiffy. So they don't have to go across the entire property to get to their food. Now, Melissa, our visitor services manager, Melissa Moreland, she lives on a farm out in the middle of nowhere in Conneautville. She's got a ton of acreage. So she's not as concerned as Brooke is about taking up space. So this is a picture of her garden on the farm. These are raised beds, but a different style. They're not actually raised up off the ground. They're just square foot method raised on the ground. And it looks like they actually built this on an old foundation. They have a lot of buildings they had to take down. Her grandfather used to be a rancher, so you know they live on an old farmstead, much like Goodell Gardens. And so you'll see that here Melissa has more space, obviously, so she can use more space to grow her food. She has more people to feed because she and her family of 4 total live on the same farm as her parents, who live across the driveway. So there's 2 more. And then Melissa's brother and wife and nephew share meals with the family. So really, she's trying to feed 4, 5, 6. She's trying to feed 7, 8 people. 9 actually. Ooh, my math is bad. So, you know, she's trying to feed almost double the amount of people that Brooke is. So she's got almost double the amount of space. And I know that Melissa and her family do a lot of canning and preserving. So they need more for that as well. Now, it's still a raised bed. They still have a fence around it. It's a lower fence. They have different critter needs. But they also have chickens. So if you have chickens, awesome. Good on you for raising your own food and having birds and getting eggs. And I love farm fresh eggs. But don't forget that while chickens will help with your pest control, they'll also pull your plants out of the ground. So, you know, this fence helps keep the chickens out, and that's important too. So thanks, Melissa, for sharing your garden with us. You'll notice that while she does use the square foot method for planting, for building her beds, she uses a combination of traditional gardening with rows and square foot gardening for her planting plan. Of course, there's traditional row gardens like my mom and dad and grandparents had. You know, so that's the rows. You do have to keep the weeds out of the rows to keep your weeds out of your gardens. But if you've got a lot of space, it's not a problem. With this method, you're planting directly in the ground, so you're going to have to get a rototiller to till up your soil. And this is more work each year with your raised beds and your super raised beds, your elevated raised beds. You're working the same soil, so really the only thing you're going to have to do for amendments is add some compost every year, maybe a little bit of vermiculite, other soil amendments. But with this, you know, you've got to till up that soil every single year. So, but even though it's more work each year, there's less startup cost. So if you don't have a lot of cash because you've been laid off from your job, you're not sure, you know, that you've got the money to buy the lumber to build the raised beds, then this is a good option for you. And it doesn't have to be this big, and you can use a variety of the methods. You don't have to plant in rows. You can plant in the square foot method right in the ground. But please think about fencing and watering for your locations and sunlight. Fencing is so important. So just a couple you know, life experiences that I've had. My grandmother had a 3 or 4 foot fence all the way around her garden. It was a wire fence on posts. It was beautiful. But then outside of that, she actually would plant cleome, because it's also known as spider flowers. It gets those purple flowers on the top. But cleome is tall, it's kind of spindly, it dances in the wind. That scared the deer away, so they wouldn't hop her fence and go in and gobble up her food. My dad, my dad is a different kind of cat, and he had a lot of trouble with deer, but he also had just a ton of trouble with woodchucks and raccoons and skunks and rabbits. So because he keeps beef at our house, he raises a couple grass-fed beef a year. He had electric fencing, so he put an electric fence around his garden, very, very low, but it keeps those critters out too. Of course, nothing is worse than sleeping in the middle of the hot summer with your windows open and having a skunk hit that electric fence, but it's an option. Just be safe and smart, and maybe don't do that if you live in the middle of town with a bunch of kids in your neighborhood, unless you put another fence around it to keep people from getting hurt. So just think about fencing and get creative if you need to. And then the last type of gardening we're going to talk about is what I've actually done. I've in the past, we lived in a house that was built into a hill kind of in the forest, and we didn't have a whole lot of sunshine. And the only place we could really grow our garden, our edibles, to get enough sunshine was in the middle of our driveway. But you don't want to leave food in your driveway all year, right? You can't actually, I was renting, I wasn't going to dig up the driveway to grow food. So we did containers. We grew our food in containers. And now where we live, we don't really have a whole lot of land. So we own our home now, but our yard is very, very small, and we have 2 dogs, and we kind of need the yard for them. So this is the method that we're going to be doing this year too, is container gardening. And so it's really helpful because it's good if you don't have a lot of space. You can do it on your patio or porch, or in a window box if you need to. It's best for small spaces and small families. So for me and my husband, Matt, it's great because there are only 2 of us. You can move your containers to follow conditions. So if you're getting too much water in one location, pick up those containers, scoot them on over somewhere else, or move them to water them and then move them back. It's easier to weed because there's not a whole lot of space, right? Like a few weeds around that tomato plant in the middle is not nearly as labor intensive as weeding this corn, these corn rows here, right? And then just keep in mind though that if you're going to grow in a container of any sort, it's going to need watered more frequently, right? Because those plants don't have access to the water in the soil. And when it comes to container gardening, it does limit your selection in plants, because not all plants are able to have shallow roots. So take a look at your seeds, or the veggie starts that you're planning on planting, and make sure that they have container garden varieties. Um, we also do hanging baskets, usually of strawberries. I've seen tomato plants and beans and peas grown in hanging baskets, like that topsy-turvy thing. We used to have a neighbor that did that. But just, think about how it does limit your selection. If you decide to use a non-traditional gardening container, like a garbage can or a storage tote, or a bucket, just make sure that you drill some holes in it for draining. Buckets and storage totes and garbage cans are actually really, really good for growing potatoes, because you can build up that potato plant, that potato mound. And so this picture we got from highmowingseeds.com. They have a great blog about container gardening. Containers are great for lots of things, particularly herbs. So yeah. And so other things to think about besides just like the type of garden you're going to do and the size of your garden and all that is sunlight, right? So sunlight is so important for germination. You need a seed, you need good soil, you need sunlight, and you need water. All right. So most, but not all veggie plants actually need 6 hours of direct sunlight per day. So take a look around your yard and see where it gets that much sunlight, because it's important. But if you and do your research, some plants don't need 6 hours of sunlight a day. So maybe you have a shade veggie garden and a sun veggie garden, or you can use runner plants like beans and peas and cucumbers and squash, to shield the shade loving plants from the direct sun, because those plants want that direct sun. So this picture here is actually from gardeners.com. They have a great cucumber trellis that you can purchase from them, to shade your other plants, or you can build it on your own. Plan to tend your garden in the morning or the evening, when the sun isn't so intense, because nothing is worse than pulling weeds at noon in the hot sun baking down on you. You'll get a sunburn. It's bad for your skin. Get a gardening hat, a big floppy hat to keep the sun off of you when you're working your garden. And just direct sun helps plants grow, but it also dries out your soil. So think about irrigation and mulching, and we'll talk more about mulching in another one of these sessions. But think about that, because that helps. Water, so important, right? Choose a location close to water, because your plants are going to need water, and water is heavy to carry. And there are different ways to water your garden, with a hose, with sprayer on a hose, a drip hose, sprinklers. We use a lot of sprinklers at Goodell Gardens because we take care of so many plants. Watering cans. If it rains, sweet, then you don't have to water your garden. But if it doesn't rain very much, then you're going to have to water it more. And then rain barrels. And there's actually a company in Lake City, Pennsylvania, that called Good Idea Group, and they make amazing rain barrels and composters. So check them out. And then remember, containers and raised beds will need more frequent watering, and that mulch is your friend. Mulch helps on a few different levels, but here, our focus is that mulch helps your soil retain that moisture. So again, here are your considerations. How much space do you have? How many people are you going to feed? Do you want raised beds or containers or hanging baskets or traditional gardens or the square foot method? Or, you really have to figure out what you're going to do there. Sunlight, you got to have it. How are you going to protect your food? How are you going to water your plants? And access. This one's a big deal. Like, how close is it to your home or kitchen? Are you or your kids or your parents, if they live with you and are elderly, or people with mobility issues, are they able to access this garden to help care for it, or to at least harvest? And are other people that you don't want able to get into your garden, or critters? So think about that. So thank you so much. I hope that this helps with your site selection. Next time, we're going to talk about our garden plan, which is your roadmap to success, right? So we'll talk about, how to plan for your garden, how to decide what kind of seeds and plant starts to purchase if you can find them, and different ways to set up that garden. If you've got questions, we'd be happy to include them in our future episodes. So email your questions to growing@goodellgardens.org, and visit us online at goodellgardens.org as well. You can also find us on Facebook, Goodell Gardens and Homestead, or Instagram at Goodell Gardens. Don't forget about our Facebook group, Goodell Gardeners, that we talked about earlier. Join us, share some tips and tricks, help us figure out where to buy seeds and plants. It'll be fun. And then, of course, thank you so much for joining. We're happy to share this content free of charge. We know that a lot of people are struggling right now and don't have a lot of money. So we know this is important, and we want to make sure that everybody has access. But if you are able and you feel moved to do so, please consider giving to Goodell Gardens and Homestead so that we can continue to offer great content like this. You can join our membership. Members give an annual donation to Goodell Gardens and then get a whole bunch of really great great perks for being a member, including but not limited to free daily admission to the gardens, free admission to our music series, free or reduced admission to our educational and special events, and free or reduced admission to over 370 botanical gardens, arboretums, and horticultural centers throughout the United States, Canada, and U.S. Virgin Islands through the American Horticultural Society's reciprocal admissions program. Members of different levels also receive free admission to a number of nature centers, history museums, and art museums through other groups that we're part of, like ANCA and Rome and Time Travelers. And so if you'd like to become a member and help sustain Goodell Gardens, visit us at goodellgardens.org/member. We are still processing memberships, and Melissa will get your cards mailed out to you as soon as we can. If you're moved to give but aren't really ready to become a member, or if you are a member but you'd like to continue to support us further because of programming like this, you can do that right on our website at goodellgardens.org/donate. It will ask for some information from you. We don't share that information with anybody. It's just a way for us to be able to thank you, so that you get your receipts. It's important right now that anybody who make a donation know that through the CARES Act, the IRS is now on your 2020 taxes will allow you to claim an above the line deduction. So that means that you don't actually have to itemize your deductions of up to $300 for charitable donations, and Goodell Gardens is included in that. So if you do donate, you'll be able to claim that on your taxes. Or if you love PayPal or have a lot of fun sitting in your PayPal account, and that's the easiest way for you to give, you can go to paypal.me/Goodell Gardens, and that'll find us as well. So thank you so much for being a part of our first ever virtual class, and we hope that you found this content valuable. Again, we're happy to take any questions you have if you email us at growing@goodellgardens.org, and we hope to see you next time when we talk about your garden plan. Thanks so much for being with us, and have just a beautiful day.